If someone had told me 30 years ago that I would sit in my big house in Des Moines and listen to my own daughter-in-law's footsteps, fearing her more than armed robbers, I would have laughed in that man's face. But here I am, Ezra Winthrop, 68 years old, sitting in a chair by the window, pretending to read the newspaper while my ears are up. My Linda died 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Quickly and mercilessly. We lived together for almost 40 years. Raised a son, Decker. The boy was always strange. He didn't inherit my hard work or my mother's kindness. But hell, he was our only child. Since Linda's gone, I've been living alone in the house we bought 20 years ago. Big, two-story, with 4 bedrooms and a spacious backyard. It now feels empty and humming. Who would have thought a long-haul truck driver could afford a house like this? Certainly not the Nebraska kid I once was. But life's a funny thing. I've always been frugal, and in the 90s I started investing. A little at first, then more. Linda laughed at my fascination with stock market reports, but stopped when we were able to buy this house without a mortgage. Now I have a sum of money in my accounts that I'd rather not talk about. At least I tried not to until my son married Rowena Teasdale 3 years ago. And now I can hear her footsteps on the second floor. Too light to be the footsteps of my heavy son. She's been up there for half an hour, and I supposedly just invited them over for dinner. Daddy, more wine? Decker peeks into the living room with a bottle in his hand. He's 35, but he looks 45, flabby, with a bald spot and a perpetually disgruntled expression. Where did I go wrong with him? Maybe I spoiled him too much with Linda. No, son, I'm done, I said. Did your wife get lost up here? He hesitates, and I see his eyes dart around for a split second, searching for the right lie. She was, looking for toilet paper, he finally squeezes out. Said she was out of it in the guest bathroom. I nod as if I believe him. Toilet paper in my bedroom closet is certainly new. Tell her I have a headache, and I think I'll go to bed early. You can leave without saying goodbye. Decker nods with relief. 10 minutes later, Rowena comes downstairs, her cheeks flushed and a strange gleam in her eyes. Oh, Ezra, what a pity you're not feeling well, she exclaims with false concern in her voice. Shall I call a doctor? No need, I reply. It's just a migraine. I'll be as good as new tomorrow. They leave, and I go upstairs and methodically check all the drawers. Yes, here it is. My personal day planner is slightly displaced. And the locked file box? The lock is intact, but the dusty surface shows fresh fingerprints. I wasn't always this suspicious. I used to trust people when I was younger. 40 years of truck driving taught me to recognize good people. But since Rowena came into our lives, something's changed. I met her at a buddy's funeral. She worked at the funeral home. Decker came along for the ride, and 6 months later they were married. I didn't realize at the time that she was 12 years younger than her son, or that at our first meeting she asked more questions about my home and work than about Decker. 2 months after the wedding, her mother, Doris, burst into our lives. Skinny, with a hooked nose and a tenacious gaze, she reminded me of a vulture. I'm going to live nearby to help the young ones, she declared when she moved into an apartment 2 blocks from their home. From then on, helping meant sticking her nose into my financial affairs. Decker never showed any interest in my investments. Before he got married, he made a few odd jobs at auto repair shops and construction crews. After the wedding, Rowena helped him get a job at an insurance company. It wasn't great, but at least there was some stability. I was even glad, though I suspected something wrong when they bought a house. Obviously not on their income. The bank gave good terms, Decker said. I didn't believe it, but I kept silent. Last summer, I'd had a minor surgery. Nothing serious, just gallstones. But Rowena suddenly started coming over more often, bringing me food, offering to help with chores. Decker usually stayed in the car, staring at his cell phone. One of those days, I found her in my office, looking through my papers. Looking for an insurance form, she explained without blinking an eye. Decker wanted to verify the details of your policy. My policy was in the top drawer of her desk, and she was digging through a folder of bank statements. I pretended to believe her, and the next day I installed a lock on my office door and a security camera in the corner of the room. Sometimes I think I'm crazy. Maybe it's senile paranoia. But then I catch Rowena's gaze when she thinks I can't see, cold, appraising, like an auctioneer's at an auction. And her mother is no better. When we get together for family dinners, Doris keeps bringing up how hard life is in retirement. Ezra, you're so lucky to have money, she says with an ill-concealed envy in her voice. A lot of people my age are struggling to make ends meet. Then she pauses, clearly expecting me to share the secrets of my financial well-being. But I just smile and turn the conversation to another topic. A month ago, I noticed that someone was going through my mail. Letters from the bank had been opened and carelessly taped back together. That was the final straw. I called my attorney, Norman Polk, and transferred most of my savings to new accounts. I left enough in the old account to avoid suspicion, but the main assets were now safely protected. In addition, I ordered a new credit card with an impressive limit of $1,900,000. Not that I needed that kind of money on hand, but I wanted to test my suspicions. 2 weeks ago at dinner, I casually mentioned the new card while pretending to be slightly tipsy. The bank sent me a platinum card, I mumbled, pretending to be sober from the wine, with a limit so high it makes my head spin. Almost $2 million. Why do I need that much? I noticed Rowena and Doris exchanging quick glances. They had the same spark in their eyes. Greed. Ezra, but it's dangerous, Doris exclaimed with feigned concern. At your age, keeping that kind of money on a card, what if they steal it? I played the part of the confident old man. Who would steal it? The card's in my wallet. The wallet's in the bedroom. Besides, I'm a light sleeper. That was a lie. Since Linda's death, I'd suffered from insomnia. But in the last few months, I started taking sleeping pills, and now I do sleep soundly. Of course, I shared that information too. The doctor prescribed the pills, and now I sleep like a dead man until the wee hours of the morning. Even if the robbers come, I won't hear them. When they left, I noticed that Decker had forgotten his scarf. That was unusual for my usually mercurial son. Maybe he didn't forget it at all. Maybe it was an excuse to come back. That night, for the first time, I seriously wondered how far they'd go. It's one thing to clean out an old man's accounts, but what if they thought I was standing in the way of more money? I remembered how insistent Rowena had been in asking me about life insurance. Fear slid down my spine with a cold snake. No, I'm not going to sit around and wait for these vultures to decide it's time to get rid of the annoying old man. I'm going to act first. The next day, I called Norman and asked him to recommend a good private investigator. 2 days later, I met with Reginald Huxley, an ex-cop with a keen eye and an impeccable reputation. Do you suspect that your sister-in-law and her mother want to steal from you? He asked after I had told my story. I am sure of it, I replied. It's just a question of when they'll make up their minds. Huxley nodded and suggested a plan. I would continue to plant information about the map and my habits, and he would set up additional surveillance of my house and Doris's apartment. In addition, I ordered a special duplicate card, outwardly indistinguishable from the real one, but with a non-functional magnetic chip. Put it in your wallet, which you'll leave in plain sight, the detective advised. Keep the real one in a safe place. And so began this strange game. I, a 68-year-old widower, became the bait in a trap for my own family. Sometimes, lying awake in my lonely bed, I think of Linda. What would she say when she saw what our family had become? But then I remember her words, spoken shortly before she died. Ezra, don't let Decker sit on your neck. He's always been a selfish boy. Linda was a wise woman. Too bad I didn't always listen to her when she was alive. Now it's time to correct that mistake. Spring rain drummed on the roof as I stood in the doorway of my office, watching Rowena, who hadn't noticed my presence. She was sitting at my desk, flipping through the pages of my financial folder with quick fingers. I'd purposely left it unlocked in my desk drawer. I wondered how long it would take my sister-in-law to get into it. Answer, less than 2 hours after she and Decker arrived for family dinner. Did you find anything interesting? I asked, and she jumped up like she'd been stung. Ezra, yeah, I was just looking for a pen to write down the recipe. She smiled, but her blush gave away her lie. Decker said you always have good pens in your office. Sure, I pointed to the cup of pens in front of her. Take any of them. She grabbed the first one she saw and hurried out, mumbling apologies. I glanced at her, then checked to see what she was looking at. My main bank statements, of course. Somehow that didn't even surprise me. More like it confirmed what I already knew. Later, when she and Decker had left, I reviewed the footage from the small camera mounted on the bookshelf. Rowena wasn't just looking through documents, she was taking pictures of them on her phone. Every page methodically and meticulously. 3 days later, I received another confirmation of my suspicions. My friend at the bank, Lester Price, called me. "Ezra, you're not going to believe this," he said. "A woman came by today asking about you. She said she was your sister-in-law." "What did she want to know?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "The usual stuff, what your accounts are, what your balance is, whether you have a will in case of, you know, in case I die," I finished for him. "Yes," Lester agreed awkwardly. I didn't tell her anything, of course. Client confidentiality and all that. "But I thought you should know." I thanked him and hung up the phone, feeling the anger boiling up inside. It was one thing to suspect, and quite another to get confirmation. So I'm not a paranoid old man out of his mind. My fears are real. That evening I was checking the mail when I noticed a familiar silver Lexus on the next street, Doris's car. She drove slowly past my house, clearly looking for something. Me? Or was she checking to see if I was home? I backed away from the window, not wanting her to see my silhouette. My trap was starting to work. It was time to take the next step. The next day I called Decker and invited him and Rowena over for dinner. To my surprise, he immediately agreed without even checking their schedule. "Can I bring my mom?" Rowena asked when she picked up the phone. "She misses a good home-cooked meal so much." "Sure," I answered. "The more the merrier." I ordered the food from the restaurant, fried chicken with mashed potatoes and vegetables, and arranged it in my pots and bowls to make it look like I was cooking it myself. Got some good wine, and even bought a pie from the bakery. Let them think I'd relaxed and let my guard down. They arrived at 6 sharp. Doris brought a bouquet of artificial flowers, a cheap gesture for a man who had recently bought a new car. Decker seemed nervous, constantly checking his cell phone. Only Rowena was in her element, smiling, joking, helping set the table. "It smells delicious, Ezra," she exclaimed. "You're a great cook." I smiled modestly, not giving away that my culinary merit was limited to the microwave. The conversation at the table flowed casually until I steered it in the right direction. "By the way, I closed that old account I was worried about," I said, pouring myself a second glass of wine. "I did as you suggested, Rowena. Put it all on a credit card." I saw Doris freeze with her fork halfway to her mouth. "All of it?" she asked me again. "You mean the whole 1,900,000? "Yeah," I pretended to be a little drunk. "The bank even offered a special safe for the card." "But why? It's safe at home." Decker choked on his wine. Rowena threw her mother a warning look. "Papa, but it's not safe," my son began. "What if someone climbs up to you?" I laughed. "Into my house? With the security system I installed after your mother died?" I deliberately lied. I didn't have any special system, but let them think otherwise. "Besides, I don't sleep at all now." "What do you mean?" Rowena asked worriedly. "The doctor prescribed some new pills. He told me to take 2 a night, but they're too strong. One of them makes me sleep like a murderer all night long." After dinner, when we moved into the living room for coffee, I accidentally left my wallet on the coffee table and went into the kitchen. Through the crack in the door, I watched Rowena cast a quick glance at Doris, and then, making sure I couldn't see, quickly opened the wallet. She found a fake credit card, an exact replica of the real one, but with no real access to the money, and froze for a moment, scrutinizing it. Then carefully put the wallet back down, exactly as it lay. When I returned with the coffee pot, Rowena was smiling, but her eyes were glittering. Doris looked animated too, though she tried to hide it behind talk of the weather. After they left, I called Huxley and told him what had happened. "They took the bait," the detective said. "Now we need to figure out when they plan to act." We decided to install additional cameras in the bedroom, hallway, and living room. Huxley also advised me to start preparing the paperwork for the police. "If they try to steal the card, it will be a criminal offense," he explained. "You'll need proof." The next day, while checking the camera footage in my office, I noticed something strange. Decker, my own son, was going through my closet late at night, after I'd already gone to bed. They didn't leave right after dinner like I thought they would. They came back on some pretext, and while Rowena distracted me with conversation, Decker slipped into the study. What was he looking for? I watched the tape a few times and realized he was checking for the security system I'd lied about at dinner. Checking the corners of the room, examining the windows, even tapping the walls. Thank goodness I'd installed a hidden camera behind the books where he hadn't realized to look. 3 days later, Rowena called with an unexpected proposal. Ezra, Decker and I were thinking, why don't you move in with us? Her voice sounded caring, but I could hear the fake notes. Your house is so big, it's hard to maintain. We have a spare room, very cozy. I almost laughed into the phone. Do they really think I'm that naive? Thank you, dear, but I'm used to my home, I answered. Besides, the doctor says it's good for me to take daily walks in my garden. But you're all alone, she insisted. What if something happens? I'll be all right, I assured her. I'm not as decrepit as I look. After that conversation, I decided it was time to be more decisive. Huxley agreed to watch my house for a few nights. We installed a remote-controlled alarm system. I could turn on all the lights in the house at the touch of a button on a key fob I always carried in my pajama pocket. A week later, I intentionally gave them new information. After inviting Decker to lunch at the cafe, he came alone. Rowena was sick. I told him about my plans for the next month. I'm going to visit an old friend in Denver, I said, for a week or two. The house will remain empty, but I'm not worried. Like I said, the security system is solid. Decker visibly perked up. When do you plan to leave? Next Friday, I answered. But first I want to put some cash in the safe at home. You know, just in case. His eyes glittered, but he quickly pulled himself together. Reasonable, he said. But isn't it too dangerous to keep cash at home? It's safe in the safe, I shrugged. Besides, no one knows about it but you. And I'm the only one who knows the code. When we said goodbye, Decker hugged me tighter than usual. I felt him pat my jacket pocket where my wallet usually was. Was he checking? Or was he looking for my house keys? Either way, he left with nothing. Back at home, I checked my messages. Huxley called twice. I called him back. We've got some interesting news, the detective said without preamble. Doris withdrew a large sum from her savings account. She also bought airplane tickets to Cancun for 3 people. The departure date is next Saturday. Cancun, I questioned. Mexico? That's right. A country without an extradition treaty with the United States, Huxley said. Convenient if you plan to escape with a large sum of money. So the plan was becoming clear. They were going to steal my credit card, cash out the money, and flee to Mexico. And they wanted to do it before I supposedly left for Denver. They were probably afraid I'd find it missing and block the card before they could use it. I thanked Huxley and hung up. Then I called Norman Polk, my lawyer, and asked him to come over tomorrow night. Is it urgent? He asked. I think my son and his wife are going to try to steal from me tonight or tomorrow, I said calmly, as if I were discussing the weather. I want you to be here when it happens, and bring the disinheritance papers we talked about. There was silence on the other end of the line. Ezra, are you sure? Absolutely, I answered. They bought tickets to Mexico for Saturday. I think they're coming tonight to pick up the map. Norman took a deep breath. I'll be at your place at 9. Ezra, I'm so sorry. I hung up the phone and walked to the window. The sun was setting, coloring the Des Moines sky red. Red like the anger I felt, not just toward Rowena and Doris, but toward my own son. How could he have fallen so low? What had Linda and I done wrong? I pushed those thoughts away. Now was not the time for self-examination. I had to get ready for the night. I checked all the cameras, made sure the alarm system was working. I put the fake credit card in my wallet and left it on the nightstand by the bed, in the most visible place. I had hidden the real card in a safe place a long time ago. Then I took an empty packet of sleeping pills out of the drawer and put it next to the glass of water. Let them think I'd taken the pills and was fast asleep. Huxley arrived at 8 o'clock, came in quietly through the back door. I escorted him into the kitchen, where he wouldn't be visible from the hall. Sit here, I said. When you hear me turn on the lights, come out and record everything on the tape recorder. The detective nodded and pulled out a small digital recorder. What if they don't show up today? They will, I said confidently. I know them. They won't miss an opportunity like this. At 9 o'clock, Norman arrived with a briefcase full of documents. I showed him the same way and sat him down next to Huxley. Ready for the show? I asked my old friend. Norman shook his head. I never thought I'd live to see it. Your son, Jesus, Ezra. I patted him on the shoulder. So did I. But we deal with what we have, not what we wish we had. At 10, I went up to the bedroom, changed into my pajamas, and lay in bed with a book. Listening to every rustle, I waited. Somewhere in the back of my mind there was a faint hope that I was wrong, that my son was not a traitor, but just a weak man who had fallen under bad influence, that all this preparation would turn out to be the vain paranoia of a lonely old man. But I knew in my heart that they would come, and I would be ready. The hands of the clock had passed midnight when I heard it, the quiet creak of the back door. They had come, just as I'd anticipated. Lying in bed with my eyes closed, I listened to the sounds in the house I knew like the back of my hand. Every creaky floorboard, every loose door could give away the intruders. But they moved carefully, too carefully for ordinary thieves. They knew where to tread to keep their footsteps quiet. They knew the layout of the house. Of course they did. They'd been here dozens of times. Norman and Huxley were waiting in the kitchen, following my plan. I had my alarm fob under my pillow and a real credit card in my pajama pocket. The fake one rested in my wallet on the bedside table, like bait in a mousetrap. Footsteps on the stairs, light, almost inaudible. Then a muffled whisper in the hallway. Women's voices. So Decker's not here? Or is he waiting outside in the car? I made a mental note to ask Huxley later. Shh, one voice hissed. Definitely Doris. If he wakes up, it's all gone. He won't wake up, replied another. Rowena. The pills he's taking will kill the horse too. I had to suppress a chuckle. The pills they were talking about were lying peacefully in my safe. The empty package on the nightstand was just a prop in my little play. The door to the bedroom slowly opened. A slit of light from the hallway fell to the floor, then disappeared. They'd shut the door behind them. I could hear their breathing, feel their presence. They stood at the threshold, probably checking to see if I was really asleep. I sniffled lightly, mimicking a deep sleep. 37 years of truck driving had taught me to doze off in even the most uncomfortable positions and circumstances. Pretending to be asleep wasn't hard. Look, the wallet's right there, Rowena whispered. Footsteps, more confident now, approached the bed. I could feel their presence close by, but I kept my breathing steady, not giving myself away in the slightest. Grab it and let's go, Doris said hurriedly. Wait, let's make sure the card's inside. There was the rustle of a wallet being opened, then a quiet, exultant sigh. There it is, Rowena's voice shook with excitement. 1,900,000. My God, with that kind of money we could live like kings, Doris said in an almost normal voice, not a whisper. Quiet, Mom. Come on, that idiot's fast asleep. Decker says that after he's taken his pills, he won't wake up. So Decker didn't just know, he was an active participant. My own son, my only child. I felt my heart clench with pain, but I didn't let myself let it show. It wasn't time yet. Let them keep talking. Let them bury themselves deeper. Is Decker waiting in the car? Rowena asked. Yes, the engine's running. As soon as we get out, we're going straight to the ATM to withdraw cash. Then we'll go home and get our stuff and go to the airport. The old man won't even notice it's missing until tomorrow morning, Rowena chuckled. We'll be in Cancun by then. Get the map and let's go. Doris sounded impatient. Wait, Rowena sounded doubtful. Shouldn't we check his safe? Decker said his father kept cash in there. There's no time. It's easier to use the card. Besides, we don't know the combination. Shomon. I think he wrote it down somewhere. That's what people his age always do. They're afraid they'll forget. A rustle. They started rummaging through the drawers of the bedside table. Nothing, Rowena said disappointedly. Right, let's get out of here. The map is already a fortune. I can't believe he kept almost $2 million on the card, Doris snorted. What an idiot. The idiot who's going to make us rich. Rowena's voice was filled with schadenfreude. The old fool won't even realize what's happened. They moved toward the door. I could almost feel their jubilation, their confidence in their success. It was time to shatter their illusions. As soon as the bedroom door closed behind them, I slid silently off the bed and pulled out my keychain. I waited a few seconds, giving them time to step out into the hallway and press the button. The effect was exactly as I had planned. The whole house was instantly flooded with bright light. Every lamp, every light fixture turned on at once. From the bedroom, I heard two startled shrieks. I stepped out into the hallway and saw them, frozen like deer in the headlights. Rowena held my wallet in her hand, her mother standing next to her, palm pressed to her mouth. Their faces turned pale with shock when they saw me, fully dressed, awake, and very much awake. "Good evening, ladies," I said calmly. "Or is it night already?" "Late night, I see." "Ezra!" Rowena tried to smile, but it was only a pathetic grimace. We were just worried about you. We heard some noises, so we thought we'd check." "Check the contents of my wallet?" I raised an eyebrow. "No, no," she tried to put it behind her back. "It's a misunderstanding." At that moment, Huxley came out of the kitchen with a recorder in his hand. "This idiot is fast asleep," came Doris's voice from the speaker of the device. "Decker says he won't wake up after the pills." Doris's face twisted in horror. She opened her mouth but couldn't utter a word. Following the detective came Norman, carrying a briefcase. His usually friendly face was cold and stern. "Ladies, let me introduce myself," Huxley said. "Reginald Huxley, private investigator. Over the past 2 weeks, I have gathered ample evidence of your intentions to steal from Mr. Winthrop." "That's absurd," Doris exclaimed, finally finding her voice. "We've done nothing of the sort. You have no right to. You are in a private house without the owner's permission, at 1 o'clock in the morning, with his wallet in your hand." Huxley interrupted her. "And you've just confessed on tape your intention to steal a large sum of money. I have every right imaginable." Rowena finally realized the gravity of the situation. Her fake smile disappeared, giving way to cold calculation. "It's your word against ours," she said. "There's no evidence that we wanted to steal anything." I pulled a real credit card out of my pocket and waved it in front of their faces. "Looking for this one?" I asked. "I'm afraid the one you took is a fake. The magnetic chip doesn't work." But it was a nice try. Rowena dropped her wallet as if it were suddenly red hot. "Look, Ezra," she started in a pleading tone. "It's not what it looks like. Mom and I just wanted to—" "Spare me." I held up my hand, cutting her off. "I've heard enough. Where's Decker?" She stopped talking, biting her lip. "My son," I insisted. "Where is he?" "In the car," she answered reluctantly. "Waiting for us." I nodded to Huxley, and he pulled out his cell phone. "I saw the car outside," the detective said. "A blue Ford, right? Let's check it out." He went outside, leaving us in tense silence. Doris leaned against the wall, suddenly 10 years older. Rowena stood with her arms crossed over her chest, clearly considering her options. Norman coughed. "Allow me to introduce myself," he said. "Norman Polk, Mr. Winthrop's attorney. In my briefcase are the documents that disinherit Decker Winthrop. I've also prepared a police report for attempted aggravated theft." "You wouldn't dare," Doris hissed. "We're family." "Family?" I grinned bitterly. "Family doesn't steal from each other, Doris. A family doesn't plan to rob an old man and run off to Mexico." "Mexico?" she asked with feigned surprise. "What a load of crap." "3 tickets to Cancun for Saturday," I said. "Funny coincidence, isn't it?" Her face contorted with rage. "You followed us. You had no right to—" "I had every right to defend myself and my property," I said. "And enough of this comedy. I know all about your plans, how you photographed my bank records, how you questioned my accounts, how you calculated the timing of the theft." At that moment, Huxley returned, leading Decker with him. My son looked both frightened and furious. "He tried to leave when he saw the lights in the house," the detective explained. "But I stopped him in time." "Dad, what's going on?" Decker tried to feign bewilderment, but it didn't work. "Why did that man grab me?" "That's enough, Decker," I said tiredly. "Game over." I pressed another button on the key fob, and a small screen lit up on the wall in the hall. It showed the image from the camera in my bedroom. Rowena and Doris leaning over the sleeping figure, pulling a credit card from her wallet. "Today's footage," I explained, "plus the footage from the last 2 weeks when you've been going through my files, discussing theft plans, checking the house for security systems." Decker went pale. "Dad, look, It was Rowena's idea. It was her idea. What? His wife turned to him, glaring angrily. You said yourself that your father wouldn't suspect a thing. You said he's always forgetting about the money in the accounts. I never said anything about stealing, shouted Decker. I thought we were just borrowing. Borrow it and pay it back later. Shut up, both of you, Huxley intervened. Mr. Winthrop, what do you want to do next? Call the police? I looked at the three of them, the woman my son had chosen to marry for some inexplicable reason, her greedy mother, and my only child who had betrayed me. I should have felt anger, but strangely, I felt only a deep, overpowering weariness. Not yet, I answered Huxley. I want to talk to my son first. Alone. The detective nodded. I'll take the women into the kitchen. Mr. Polk, would you mind keeping an eye on them? Norman agreed, and soon Decker and I were alone in the hall. My son looked pathetic, hunched over, avoiding my gaze. Why? I asked simply. Why did you do it? He shrugged, still not looking at me. Money, he muttered. We needed money. You have a job. Rowena had a job too. What were you lacking? It's not enough, he suddenly shouted. You don't understand. Mortgages, bills, loans. We're in debt. And instead of asking for help, you decided to steal from me? Would you give us $2 million? There was bitterness in his voice. You've always been a cheapskate, always saving for a rainy day. Even Mom said you were obsessed with money. I shook my head. Linda never said that. It was his fiction, an excuse for his own greed. I earned every dime with honest labor, I said quietly. 40 years behind the wheel, thousands of miles away from my family. And yes, I was saving money, so we could have a house, so you could get an education, so your mom and I could provide for your future. And what did I get? He snapped at me. A job at an insurance company for a pittance. And you're sitting on millions and counting every penny. So you thought it was easier to steal? I looked him straight in the eye. The son I raised couldn't do that. You don't know anything about me, he shouted. You've always been on the road. It was my mom who raised me, not you. Those words hurt more than I expected. There was some truth to them. I was away a lot. But did I have a choice? Someone had to provide for the family. And that justified betrayal? I asked quietly. He lowered his eyes, the silence lingering. What now? He finally asked. Are you going to put us in jail? I took the keychain out of my pocket and weighed it in my palm. One phone call, and their lives are ruined. Prison time for attempted grand larceny, career over, public shame. No, I finally said, but the three of you will leave my house right now and never come back. What do you mean, never come back? Decker stared at me blankly. That's what it means. From now on, I have no son, no daughter-in-law, no, whatever Doris is to me. I nodded toward the kitchen. Go and gather your women and leave. Norman has already prepared the papers. You're disinherited. I'm giving you until morning to leave town. If you're still here in the morning, I'll turn over the records to the police. You can't, he started, but I interrupted. I can and I will. This is my last act of mercy, Decker. Get out of my life. I turned my back on him and strode into the living room, feeling every step hard to take. I heard his footsteps behind me. He was heading into the kitchen to break the news to Rowena and Doris. I sank into the chair by the window, the same one Linda used to sit in when she waited for me to return from my flights. A strange calmness came over me. It was as if I'd finally shed the heavy weight I'd been carrying for years. Norman came by to say goodbye half an hour later. They're gone, he said. Huxley would make sure they actually left town. I nodded, unable to utter a word. Ezra, he put his hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry. If you need anything. Thanks, man, I interrupted him. The only thing I needed right now was to be alone. When he left, I sat in the silence of the empty house, staring at Linda's picture on the mantelpiece. I thought she was looking at me with understanding and sadness. That's it, darling, I whispered. Our family is finally broken. I'm sorry I couldn't keep what we had created. But deep down, I knew Linda would understand. She'd always seen right through Decker, even when I refused to notice his flaws. He takes but never gives in return, she'd said of our son. In my hand, I still clutched the real credit card, a symbol of what would be the end of my independent life. That card would now be a reminder of how close I had come to the edge of the abyss and how I had miraculously avoided falling. Dawn was breaking outside my window, the first rays of sunlight touching the roofs of the neighboring houses. A new day, a new life. Without a sun, but also without illusions. Maybe there was a kind of liberation in that. The morning after the night of exposure greeted me with an unusual silence. Usually at this time, you can already hear the noise of a neighbor's lawnmower or the barking of dogs out for a walk. But today it was as if the city itself had decided to give me a break, wrapping the house in a blanket of silence. I didn't sleep. After Decker, Rowena, and Doris left, I'd sat in a chair until dawn, thinking about everything that had happened. Now, with the first rays of sunlight, the fatigue was a leaden weight, but I still couldn't sleep. His mind was reeling with fragments of the night's conversation, faces contorted with surprise and fear when the lights came on. The phone rang around 8. Huxley said he'd followed them to a motel on the outskirts of town. I don't think they'll risk coming back, the detective said, but just in case, I'll keep watch for another 24 hours. I thanked him and hung up. Strangely, instead of relief, I felt empty. It was as if something inside me had broken off, and now there was a gaping hole with nothing to fill it. Around 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Norman stood on the doorstep with a bag from the bakery and a concerned look on his face. "Thought you might not have had breakfast," he said, holding out the bag. I let him in, nodding gratefully. We made our way to the kitchen, where I brewed coffee while Norman arranged the scones on plates. "How are you?" he asked, watching me mechanically stir the sugar in my cup. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "It's like I'm in some kind of fog. It doesn't seem real." Norman nodded. Betrayal of loved ones is the most painful wound, especially when it's your child. I sipped my coffee, feeling the hot liquid burn my throat. It almost felt good. At least I could feel something. "You know, I always thought the worst thing in my life had already happened when Linda died," I said. But it turned out there was more to lose. Norman put his hand on my shoulder. "You need to rest, Ezra. Maybe go away for a while. Do you have relatives in other cities?" I shook my head. "My whole family is here. Was here." We were silent for a moment, then I remembered the documents. "Did you bring everything I asked for?" Norman nodded and pulled a folder out of his briefcase. "The disinheritance papers. I filed them this morning. It's official." I took the papers and looked through them. My handwriting. My signature. Decker Winthrop is officially no longer my heir. Strangely, it didn't bring any satisfaction. Just another piece of paper confirming the breakup of my family. After Norman left, I tried to do the usual things. Dusting, paying bills, going through the mail. But it all fell apart. Finally, I just sat by the window, looking out at the street where the neighborhood kids were playing. One of them had a bicycle, just like the one I'd once bought Decker for his 8th birthday. I remember teaching him to ride, running beside him and holding onto the seat. He laughed, happy and carefree. When did it all go wrong? Around 3 in the afternoon, the phone rang again. The number was unidentifiable, and I had little doubt who it was. "Dad," Decker's voice sounded tired. We need to talk." "I think we said everything to each other yesterday," I answered. "No, we didn't. Can we meet?" "I'm alone without Rowena." I was silent for a moment, weighing my options. Common sense said no, but something, perhaps the remnants of parental feeling, made me agree. An hour later, in Gray's Park, on a bench by the pond. "Thank you," he exhaled. "I'll be there." I hung up and called Huxley, informing him of the upcoming meeting. "I don't think he's dangerous," the detective said, "but I'll be nearby, just in case." Gray's Park was a 15-minute walk from my house. I deliberately arrived early and sat on a bench overlooking a small artificial pond with ducks. It had been Linda's and my favorite picnic spot when Decker was little. He showed up at 4 sharp, as if he was afraid he'd be late for a business meeting. He looked bruised, dark circles under his eyes. He sat down next to me, leaving enough room for one more person between us. "Thank you for coming," he began without looking at me. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "What happened yesterday?" He hesitated. "It was all misunderstood." "Was it?" I raised an eyebrow. So I misunderstood when I saw your wife and mother-in-law steal my credit card? No, it's... He swallowed. Look, Dad, we were desperate. We have a huge amount of debt. Mortgages, loans. Rowena lost her job 3 months ago, but she didn't want to tell you. So you decided to steal from me? We wanted to borrow, he exclaimed. Take the money, solve the problems, and then gradually pay it back. You wouldn't even notice. I shook my head. Decker, you bought tickets to Mexico. That doesn't sound like a borrow and payback plan. He lowered his eyes. It was Rowena's idea, and Doris. They said we should go away for a while things settle down. And you just complied, of course, I said bitterly. It's always someone else's fault, isn't it, son? Rowena, Doris, circumstances, never you. He raised his head, anger in his eyes. It's always you, always judging, never trying to understand. Do you think it's easy for me? You think this is the life I wanted? What kind of life did you want? I asked quietly. Your mother and I gave you everything we could. A good home, an education, support. What were you missing? You, he shouted. You were missing. You were always on the road, always working. And when you got here, you were either asleep or working on your goddamn investments. I felt something tighten in my chest. Maybe there was some truth to what he said. But did that justify betrayal? Was that why you decided to steal my money? It's your own fault. Decker jumped up from the bench, his face reddening. You manipulated us, setting traps, spying on us. What kind of normal father does that? What normal son plans to rob his own father? I retorted. I hate you, he hissed. I always have. You're a cold, calculating old man who loves money more than his own son. The words hit me harder than I expected. A lump formed in my throat, but I forced myself to stay calm. If that's what you really think, then we have nothing more to talk about, I said, rising from the bench. Wait, Decker grabbed my arm. You can't just give up on us. We're your family. Family doesn't steal from each other. I released my hand. Family doesn't plan a getaway with stolen money. What do you want from me? An apology? He spread his hands. Okay, I apologize. Happy? Now can we forget about it and move on? I looked at him and didn't recognize him. This grown man with the angry look and the wry mouth was my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the teenager I'd been helping with homework. No, Decker, I said quietly. You can't just apologize and forget. Some actions can't be undone. Some words can't be taken back. So what now? He crossed his arms over his chest. You gonna keep us on the hook for the rest of our lives? Blackmail us with the threat of the police? I'm not gonna blackmail you. I just want you out of my life. His face contorted with anger. You can't just cut us out. I have rights. I'm your son. Your blood. Blood doesn't make people family, Decker, I replied. Actions do. And your deeds. Your actions have shown me what you've become. I turned to leave, but his next words stopped me. How did you think Rowena knew about your map? He sounded gloating. I told her. I knew all about your money. Mom told me everything before she died. I turned around slowly. What did you say? Mom, he repeated defiantly. She knew you were hiding things from her. And before she died, she opened my eyes to your machinations. Don't you dare involve your mother, I said, steel in my voice. Linda would never have approved of what you did. You didn't know anything about her, he shouted. She tolerated you, but she didn't love you. How can you love a man who's always traveling and obsessed with money? I stared at him, feeling a cold rage growing inside. He was desecrating Linda's memory, using her name to justify his actions. That's enough, I said quietly but firmly. I never want to see you again. Never again. Dad! No. From now on, I have no son. I've cut you out of my will, and you're out of my life. His face turned white. You can't. You're going to regret this. I shook my head. The only thing I regret is not seeing what you've become sooner. Goodbye, Decker. I walked away without looking back. I could hear him screaming, threatening, cursing behind me. But with every step I took, they got quieter and quieter until they were gone. Huxley was waiting for me on the way out of the park. Is everything all right? He asked, looking at my face. No, I answered honestly, "But it will be." We walked slowly down the street, heading toward my house. The spring day was turning toward evening, and the air smelled of lilacs and freshly cut grass. "You know," Huxley said, breaking the silence, "I've seen a lot of family betrayal in my 20 years of work. It's always hard." I nodded, unable to find the words. "But I've also seen people recover from it," he continued, "building a new life, finding new meaning." "It's not so easy at my age," I replied. "When you're 68, starting from scratch, it takes strength." "Maybe," he agreed, "but you have an advantage." "What's that?" "You know who you are. And from what I've seen over the weeks, you're a man with a backbone, Mr. Winthrop. It's easier for people like that to recover." I nodded gratefully, touched by his words. When I got home, the first thing I did was check the answering machine. 5 missed calls, 2 from Decker, 2 from Rowena, and 1 from Doris. I didn't listen to the messages, just deleted them all. Then I went upstairs to the bedroom and opened the closet. On the top shelf was a box of photos. My life with Linda, captured on paper. I pulled it out and sat on the bed, going through the pictures. Here was our wedding. Young, happy, hopeful. There's Decker's birth, a tiny bundle in Linda's arms. First steps, first bike, high school graduation. Moments that seemed eternal, but turned out to be so fragile. I lingered over one picture of the 3 of us at a picnic, just inside Grace Park. Decker's about 10, smiling, showing off his missing front tooth. Linda laughs and I hug them both, looking at the camera with pride. What happened to that boy in the picture? At what point did he turn into a man capable of betraying his own father? Maybe Decker was right, and I really was too busy working. Maybe I missed something important, missed the first signs of trouble, or was it something else, his own choices, the influence of Rowena and her mother? I looked at the photo, and for the first time all day, I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Not over the betrayal, not over the loss of money. It was the loss of a son I may never have truly known. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my musings. Norman was there with a bottle of whiskey. "Decided you shouldn't be alone tonight," he said. I let him in, grateful for the company. We sat in the living room drinking whiskey and talking about the past, the times when we were young, our wives, our children. Norman didn't mention what had happened, and I was grateful to him for that. When he left well past midnight, I felt a little better. Not healed, that would take much longer, but at least able to breathe without feeling pain with each breath. The next morning I was awakened by a phone call. It was Huxley. "They're out of town," he reported. "We saw them loading stuff into the car around 6 in the morning. Headed south, probably headed for Texas." "Thanks," I said. Thanks for everything you've done." "Just doing my job," the detective replied. "But if you need anything else, call me." After he called, I felt strangely relieved. They were gone. That chapter of my life is closed. What would happen next was unknown, but at least I could start moving forward. I went down to the kitchen and felt hungry for the first time in 2 days. I made myself scrambled eggs and bacon. Linda always said it was the best cure for sadness, and sat down at the table. The house seemed too big and empty. Too many rooms for one person, too many memories. Maybe Norman was right and I should leave. Start over somewhere new? I picked up a newspaper and opened the real estate section. Without knowing why, I started looking at ads for houses in cities other than Des Moines. Minnesota's Lake Country, the Oregon coast, the mountains of Colorado. Places Linda and I dreamed of visiting someday, but never got around to it. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe at 68, life is just beginning. I set the paper aside, undecided. It's too soon. First, I need to heal my wounds to accept what happened, and then think about the future. But for the first time in these hard days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps all is not lost. Perhaps, even after such a betrayal, life goes on. The locksmith's doorbell rang at exactly 9 in the morning. I opened it almost immediately. I hadn't slept all night, just sitting in my chair, going through old photographs and trying to figure out when everything had gone wrong. "Mr. Winthrop?" A young guy with a toolbox held out his hand to me. "Brandon from Safe Locks. You paged me?" "Yeah, come on in." I stepped aside to let him in. "I need all the locks replaced. The front, the back, and the garage locks too." Brandon nodded, not asking any questions. Probably seen a lot of cases of people changing locks in a hurry. Divorce, theft, family conflicts, all kinds of reasons. I'll do everything in the best way, he promised, pulling out his tools. A couple of hours, and you'll be as safe as a wall. I left him to his work and went up to the office. Norman had already prepared everything yesterday. The disinheritance petition was officially filed, but there were still a lot of formalities to go through. Signatures, notaries, court. Norman warned that the process could take months. Decker would probably challenge the decision, look for loopholes, feign remorse. I knew I should feel anger. I should want revenge, want them all to get what they deserved. But in a strange way, the anger gave way to a strange numbness, like I was watching my own life from the outside, like a spectator in a movie theater. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Huxley, with a folder under his armpit and a serious expression on his face. "Good morning, Mr. Winthrop." He held out the folder. "All the material I've been able to gather. Camera footage, photos of their actions, evidence of planning the theft. If you decide to go to the police, you're all set." I took the folder, but didn't open it, just put it on the hall table. "Thank you, Huxley. You did a great job." The detective hesitated, clearly wanting to say something. "Anything else?" I asked. "Yeah, there's something." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his inside jacket pocket. "Found it in their motel room after they left." The maid found it in the trash can. I unfolded it. It was a draft of a letter written in Decker's hand. The unsent letter was addressed to my bank. "Due to the deteriorating condition of my father, Ezra Winthrop, I, his son and trustee, request full access to his accounts." Next came the legal wording, references to some article. At the end was a signature, an inept forgery of my handwriting. I felt nausea rising in my throat. They weren't just planning to steal a credit card. They were planning a full-scale robbery. They wanted to rob me of all my money and make me look like an incapacitated old man. "When did they write this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yesterday or the day before, according to the dates on the motel," Huxley answered. "I guess it was a backup plan in case the map didn't work out." I folded the letter and handed it back to him. "Add it to the rest of the evidence." Huxley nodded, looking at me carefully. "Mr. Winthrop, I don't mean to pry, but you should be careful. People like that can be dangerous, especially when cornered." I chuckled. "Dangerous? My son and his wife. People who are willing to engage in such machinations are capable of many things," the detective replied seriously. "I would recommend that you at least install a serious security system and maybe think about getting away for a while." When Huxley left, I went back into the living room and sat in the chair, thinking about what he'd said. Was it really that serious? Could my own son really be a danger to me? The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. I looked at the caller ID, Rowena. After hesitating, I picked up the phone. Ezra, my sister-in-law's the voice of my daughter-in-law, sounded unexpectedly soft, even remorseful. "Please listen to me. What happened? It was a terrible mistake. Thinking 3 times before reaching into someone else's pocket isn't such hard advice," I replied dryly. "I know it seems awful," she paused, "but we were really desperate. We have debts, problems. Decker lost his job 3 months ago and didn't want to tell you. So you decided to steal $2 million from me?" "We just wanted to borrow," she exclaimed, "to solve problems and then pay you back. Decker said you'd never give us money for nothing, that you were stingy." I felt the anger boiling up inside me again. "Let's skip that part, Rowena. What do you want?" "Give us another chance." A pleading note appeared in her voice. "We've come to our senses. We'll do whatever it takes to make things right." "Where's Decker? Why hasn't he called?" He's, She hesitated. "He's too proud, and he's ashamed. Tell him I don't want to talk to you or him or your mother anymore," I said firmly. "Our paths parted. Forever." I hung up without waiting for an answer. A minute later, the phone rang again. I didn't answer, and after the 5th ring, there was silence. Brandon finished changing the locks around noon. He handed me 3 sets of new keys and a detailed instruction manual. "These locks are virtually impossible to pick," he proudly announced. "It's the latest development, with an aluminum core and an anti-pick system." I paid and thanked him. As the locksmith's car rounded the corner, I went back inside feeling strangely relieved. Now my house was truly my fortress. No one could enter without my permission. I sat at the kitchen table, looking at my new keys. I remembered when Linda and I had moved into this house 20 years ago, how we'd enjoyed every little thing, the spacious kitchen, the large garden, the porch overlooking the street, how we dreamed of our grandchildren growing up here. Grandchildren. The thought pricked suddenly sharp. Now I will never have grandchildren. I'll never hear children's laughter within these walls. Never teach kids how to ride a bike like Decker once did. I sighed heavily, pushing those thoughts away. No need to regret what might have been. Linda always said, "Live in the present, Ezra. The past has already happened. The future has yet to come. There is only now." Linda, what would she do if she were me? Would she have forgiven her son's betrayal, or would she have remained steadfast? I've asked myself that often in the last few days. I went up to the second floor to our bedroom. I hadn't changed a thing since Linda's death. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her creams and perfumes were on the dressing table. Her books were on the bedside table. I sat on the edge of the bed, on her side, and picked up a silver-framed photograph, our wedding picture. Linda was smiling at the camera, so young, so happy. I looked a little embarrassed, but infinitely proud. "What would you say, Linda?" I whispered, looking at the picture. "What would you do?" Of course, there was no answer, but I suddenly remembered a conversation we'd had shortly before she died. It was shortly after I met Rowena. Linda was already very ill, spending most of her time in bed. I told her about how Decker had introduced us to his new girlfriend. "She was weird," Linda said, writhing in pain, "always asking about our house, about your job. Never once asked about Decker, how he was as a kid. She was just nervous, I guessed. Meeting a guy's parents is always stressful." Linda shook her head. "No, it wasn't that. She was looking at you like an ATM machine, like she was gauging how much you could withdraw." I laughed then, thinking her suspicions were exaggerated. "All girls are interested in the financial situation of their potential husband," I said. "It's natural." "Ezra," Linda took my hand, her fingers so fragile, almost transparent. "Promise me you'll be careful. With her and with Decker, too." "With Decker?" I wondered. "He's our son." "That's why I'm worried," she said. "We spoiled him too much, always giving him what he wanted. Never taught him the value of money, of work, of effort." "You're exaggerating," I objected. "He's a good boy." "He's selfish, Ezra," she said quietly. "I'm his mother. I have a right to say that. He's always thinking of himself. And this girl, she'll only reinforce that trait." I dismissed her words, thinking they were the result of illness, fatigue, medication. But now I realized that Linda saw what I refused to see. She was always more perceptive than me when it came to people. Maybe if I had listened to her then, things would have turned out differently. If I had been a more attentive father, more strict, more present in my son's life. I thought back to all those years on the road hauling freight from state to state, weeks and months away from home, phone calls instead of face-to-face interactions, gifts instead of time together. Yes, I provided for my family, gave them everything they needed and more. But maybe Decker didn't need things. Maybe he needed me. My attention, my time, my presence. These thoughts hurt, but I forced myself to keep going. I had to be honest with myself. Yes, I made mistakes in raising my son. Yes, I was often away when I was needed at home. Yes, I relied on Linda for the emotional side of parenting. But does that justify betrayal? Are childhood resentments enough reason to steal from your own father? No. Whatever mistakes I made, Decker's choices were his own. He's an adult capable of discerning right from wrong, and he made his choice. I put the picture back on the nightstand and went downstairs. In the kitchen cabinet, I found a bottle of whiskey, a good single malt scotch I kept for special occasions. Poured himself 2 fingers and sat down in the chair by the window. The whiskey burned my throat, warming me from the inside out. I looked out at the street, at the neighbors' houses, at the children playing. Just an ordinary day in Des Moines. The world kept spinning even though my life was falling apart. The doorbell rang, making me wince. Norman stood on the doorstep with a folder of papers. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said, but there was some news that would be better discussed in person. I let him in, offered him a whiskey, but he declined. Decker called me, Norman said without preamble. Threatened to sue if we continued the disinheritance process. I snorted. On what grounds is he going to sue? He says he can prove you're incapacitated. Norman looked worried. Claims he has medical documents that prove you have dementia. What? I couldn't believe my ears. What kind of documentation? I'm perfectly healthy. Of course it's a forgery, the lawyer nodded. But if he files such a suit, we'll have to fight it in court. It would be long, messy, and public, I wondered. So they're willing to go that far? Declare me crazy? Take away control of my own life? What's your advice, I asked Norman. To continue the process, he replied firmly. We have proof of their attempted theft. If Decker files an incapacity suit, we'll present that evidence. The court will see it's all an attempted fraud. What if he forged a convincing document? Then we'll do an independent medical review. Any normal doctor will confirm that you're sane. I nodded, agreeing with his reasoning, but my heart was still heavy. There was a war to be fought, a dirty, exhausting war, with my own son. There's something else. Norman pulled a sheet of paper from the folder. I've prepared an application for a restraining order. If you sign it, Decker, Rowena, and Doris can't come within 100 meters of you. You think that's necessary? After what they tried to do? He looked at me seriously. Yes, I think it's necessary. I signed the paper, feeling bitter with every stroke of the pen. I never thought I would have to get a legal defense from my own son. After Norman left, I sat in silence for a long time, reflecting on everything that had happened. The anger I'd been suppressing all day finally broke through. I threw the whiskey glass at the wall, watching it shatter into dozens of shards. How dare he? How could my son, my flesh and blood, do such a thing? Not just try to steal money, but plan to declare me incapacitated to take control of my life. Rage raged inside, demanding an outlet. I grabbed Decker's picture off the mantelpiece and threw it to the floor with force. The glass shattered, the frame bent. And then as suddenly as it had begun, the rage subsided, giving way to a deep, all-consuming sadness. I knelt down, picking up the pieces, and suddenly I felt tears streaming down my cheeks. I cried, for the first time since Linda died. I cried for the son I'd lost, for the grandchildren I would never see, for the family I no longer had. I don't know how long I sat on the floor among the shards. When I finally got up, it was dark outside the window. I was devastated, drained. But in a strange way, there was a kind of release in that emptiness. It was as if I'd cried my sorrows out, and I could finally move on. I went upstairs to Decker's bedroom, which had been empty since he left home years ago. His old stuff was still stored there. Sports trophies, school books, posters of rock bands on the walls. I started putting it all in boxes, methodically, carefully, without emotion. Books, clothes, toys, photos, everything that reminded me of the son who betrayed me. When I finished, I took the boxes to the garage. I didn't throw them away. After all, they were part of my life, part of my history. But I put them out of sight so as not to reopen the wounds. When I got back to the bedroom, I sat down on the bed and took the wedding photo of Linda and me in my hands again. I'm sorry I didn't keep our boy safe, I whispered. I'm sorry I couldn't be a better father. I could almost physically feel her responding. You did the best you could, Ezra. Every man chooses his own path. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I could have been more attentive, more present in my son's life. But I loved him. I always have. And I did what I thought was right, providing for my family, building a future. I didn't regret stopping them the night of the theft. I didn't regret the decision to disinherit Decker. Some actions can't be forgiven. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they've been burned. But part of me still mourned the loss. Not of money, not of possessions, but of family. The dream of not being alone in my old age. The hope that I could pass on my wisdom, my experience, my love. I lay down on the bed without undressing and closed my eyes. For the first time in days, I felt tired, a deep, bone-deep fatigue. Tomorrow would be a new day. Tomorrow I would have to decide how to live my life. But today I could just rest. Before I fell into sleep, I thought about Huxley's words about leaving, starting over. Maybe he was right. Maybe this house, full of the ghosts of the past, wasn't the place for me anymore? The thought didn't seem so crazy. Des Moines was the city where Linda and I had built a life, raised a son. But now all that was left here were bitter memories and dashed hopes. Maybe it's time to move on, to find a new place, new people, a new meaning to life. I didn't know the answer, but for the first time in a long time, I felt that I had a choice, that my life didn't end with my son's betrayal or Linda's death, that new opportunities, new roads might lie ahead. With that thought, I finally fell asleep, sounder than I had in days. Lake Vermilion greeted me with dawn silence, broken only by the sound of waves lapping against the wooden dock. 4 months had passed since the night my life had been turned upside down. 4 months, and here I am, in northern Minnesota, in a small wooden house on the shores of one of the most beautiful lakes in the Midwest. I took a sip of coffee from the thermos and adjusted my fishing rod. Fishing had never been a hobby of mine in Des Moines. There wasn't enough time, and there wasn't the right place. But here in Tower, a town of 500 people, it was almost a religion, and I quickly became absorbed in this meditative practice. The decision to move didn't come right away. For almost a month, I lived in my Des Moines home like I was under siege. I changed the locks, installed an alarm system, even hired a security firm to patrol it at night. Norman fought Decker's legal attacks. My son actually filed a lawsuit to declare me incompetent, presenting false medical documents. Fortunately, an independent examination quickly disproved these falsehoods. And then I woke up one morning and realized I couldn't go on like this. I can't live in a constant state of tension, waiting for my own son to do something bad to me. I can't walk by the room where he grew up every day and think about what went wrong. Called Norman that same day and asked him to find a good realtor. 2 weeks later, my house was listed for sale. Another month later, I received a good offer from a young couple with 2 kids. They fell in love with the spacious rooms, large backyard, and quiet neighborhood. I accepted, even lowering the price a bit. I wanted the house to be filled with children's laughter again. Then there was the question of where to move next. When I was younger, Linda and I often talked about settling down by the lake someday. Fishing, boating, just enjoying nature. Fate had it differently. Work, family, Linda's illness. We never realized that dream. Now at the age of 69, I decided to finally do what we dreamed of. I found information on the internet about Minnesota's scenic lakes, picked a few places and went exploring. Lake Vermilion won me over at first sight. Crystal clear water, pine forests along the shores, a quiet town without the hustle and bustle. A small house 10 steps from the water was reasonably priced. 2 bedrooms, a spacious living room with a fireplace, a veranda overlooking the lake. What else does a lonely old man need? I bought it without haggling and moved in a week later. I took only the essentials with me: clothes, a few books, pictures of Linda, and a few kitchen utensils. Everything else I either sold or gave to charity. I gave Norman power of attorney to handle all legal affairs in Des Moines. He was to give my new address only to those who really needed to know: the bank, the insurance company, the IRS. To everyone else, especially Decker and his wife, I just disappeared. The fish were biting reluctantly that morning, but it didn't upset me. Sitting on the dock, watching the rising sun reflect in the calm water, was peaceful. Here, away from the hustle and bustle, I could finally breathe. "Good morning, neighbor," came a cheerful voice from behind me. "How's the catch?" I turned around and saw Harold Pratt, a stocky 70-year-old man with a long gray beard. Harold was my nearest neighbor. His cabin was a 5-minute walk away. A former forester, he'd lived on the lake for 20 years and seemed to know everything about Vermilion. "Not really," I said, pointing to the empty bucket. "I guess it just wasn't my day." "I just picked the wrong spot," Harold said, sitting down next to me on the dock. "This time of year, the bays are closer to the eastern bay. The water's warmer there." He took a thermos out of his jacket pocket and offered me coffee. I declined, pointing to mine. "How are you settling in?" he asked, pouring himself a steaming drink. "Some, little by little," I answered. "I'm still getting used to the quiet. After the city, it's so quiet." Harold nodded understandingly. "For the first month, I couldn't sleep at all. It was too quiet. Then I got used to it. Now when I go into town, I get a headache from the noise." We were silent for a while, looking at the water. Harold was not an intrusive conversationalist, another quality I appreciated. He could talk if he was in the mood, and keep quiet if he saw that a person was not in the mood for conversation. "Listen," he said after a pause, "me and the boys are going to Fred Johnson's tonight. Cards, beer, talk. Nothing fancy. You want to join us?" I've been thinking. It had been 2 weeks since I'd moved in, but I still kept to myself. I said hello to my neighbors, exchanged a few words at the store or the post office, but I didn't get close to anyone. Old hermit habits die hard. "Come on, Ezra," Harold encouraged me. "You can't sit alone in your cabin forever. It's not healthy." He was right. I moved here to start a new life, not just a new place to be alone. "Okay," I agreed. "What time?" "7 o'clock," Harold brightened. "Do you know the address?" "The White House with the blue shutters, across the street from the church." I nodded. In a small town like this, it was hard not to know where someone lived. The evening at Fred's was exactly as Harold had described it, casual and unpretentious. 6 men my age or a little younger, all local old-timers, welcomed me without question. We played poker, drank beer, discussed fishing, the weather, and the latest town news. No one asked why I moved to the tower at my age and alone. They just accepted me for who I was, a somewhat withdrawn widower with a past he'd rather not talk about. It was refreshing. In Des Moines, everyone knew me as Father Decker, Linda's husband, a former truck driver who'd been fortunate enough to invest in stocks. Here I could just be Ezra, the new neighbor who's not fishing well yet, but learning. Returning home past midnight, I felt slightly intoxicated, not so much by the beer, but by the feeling that life could really begin again. Even at 69, the following weeks passed in a pleasant routine. Mornings were spent fishing on the pier or walking along the shore. In the afternoon, household chores, reading books on the veranda, sometimes trips to the neighboring town for groceries. In the evenings, I spent more and more time with new acquaintances, playing cards at Fred's, going to Harold's barbecue, helping Bob Anthony fix his old boat. Called Norman once a week to catch up on news from Des Moines. Mostly bureaucratic. The sale of the house had been finalized, all the paperwork was done, and the money had been transferred to my account. Norman mentioned Decker and Rowena only in passing. They'd withdrawn their disability suit after the medical exam failed, but were still looking for ways to contest the disinheritance. "They're short on money," Norman said during one of those calls. "I heard from mutual friends that they sold their car and moved into a smaller apartment. Rowena got a job at a supermarket. Decker's been scraping by on odd jobs." I felt no gloating or sympathy, just a detached interest, as if I were talking about characters from a TV show, not my own son. "And Doris?" I asked. "She's gone to Phoenix to stay with her sister, as far as I know." "Okay," I changed the subject. "How's the transfer of my investment going?" It was during that period that I began to think more about what to do with my money. I had no direct heirs. Decker was officially disinherited. Linda and I had no other children, no close relatives. Who would get everything when I was gone? After much deliberation, I decided to establish a charitable foundation that would support children from low-income families, pay for their education, medical care, developmental programs. Linda always said that every child deserves a chance, no matter what kind of family they come from. Now I could make that dream come true. Norman helped with the legal side of things. The Linda Winthrop Memorial Fund was officially incorporated in July, and by the end of the summer it was up and running, awarding its first scholarships to 5 Des Moines students. It was after the foundation was established that Decker showed up again. Not in person, he didn't know my new address, but through Norman. "Your son called the office," the lawyer informed me. "Seems he'd heard about the foundation in the papers. He was very excited, said he wanted to reconcile, get a fresh start, and at the same time get access to the foundation's money." "I didn't ask what his motives were," Norman said diplomatically. "I'm just saying that he asked for your new address or phone number." "And what did you say?" "That I wasn't authorized to disclose that information." He got angry, threatened to sue, but he cooled down quickly. I guess he realized it was useless. I thanked Norman for his restraint and hung up. Strangely enough, Decker's call didn't stir up any strong emotions in me. No anger, no longing, No desire to repair the relationship. Just a statement of fact. He'd tried to access my money again, now through reconciliation. A week later, a letter arrived from Rowena. Somehow she'd figured out my mailing address. A long, emotional message, full of apologies, assurances of remorse, and requests for forgiveness. We were desperate. We never meant to hurt you. Decker misses you so much. Standard phrases that lack sincerity. At the end of the letter, as if in between, it mentioned that they were having serious financial difficulties, that Decker couldn't find a steady job because of stress after a family conflict, and that they would appreciate any help during this difficult time. I burned the letter in the fireplace and asked the post office not to accept any more correspondence from that address. But Rowena proved persistent. A month later, another letter arrived, this time in Decker's name. The handwriting, of course, was hers. I knew my son's scribbles well enough. Same thing, apologies, promises to make amends, assurances of filial love, and of course, requests for financial help, now in direct text. This letter suffered the same fate as the first. I changed my phone number and alerted the local post office to return all letters from Rowena or Decker Winthrop to the sender. In late August, Harold suggested a fishing trip to a more remote part of the lake, where he said there were some particularly large walleye. We loaded the gear into his old pickup truck and set out in the early morning. "Listen, Ezra," he said when we were already on the water in his small motorboat. "Me and the boys have been wanting to ask for a long time, but we haven't dared." "Who are you hiding from?" I looked at him in surprise. "What makes you think I'm hiding?" "Well," Harold shrugged, "you don't talk about your past. You change your phone number. You ask the post office not to accept letters from certain people. That doesn't sound like someone who just decided to have a change of scenery." I sighed. Of course, in a small town like this, it's hard to hide anything. Everyone knows everything, even if they pretend not to notice. "From my son," I finally admitted, "and his wife." Harold nodded, showing no surprise. "Family matters are the hardest," he said. "My youngest daughter hasn't spoken to me in 15 years, accuses me of divorcing her mother, even though it was Martha who left me, not the other way around." We were silent for a while, working on our tackle. Then I decided to tell him, briefly without too much detail, about the attempted theft, about the betrayal, about my decision to cut all ties. Harold listened attentively, without interrupting. When I finished, he just nodded. "It's a tough story," he said. "But you know what? You did the right thing. Some relationships are toxic, even if they're blood ties. Sometimes the best way out is to walk away." There was no judgment or attempt at unsolicited advice in his words, just understanding and acceptance. And that was exactly what I needed. That afternoon, we caught enough pike perch for a nice dinner and invited the rest of the company over. Sitting on the veranda of my house in the evening, surrounded by my new friends, I suddenly realized how much my life had changed over the months. I was no longer a lonely, broken old man hiding from my own son. I was Ezra Winthrop, a fisherman, a neighbor, a friend, a man who could have a future despite the past. Autumn in Minnesota is a riot of colors, from bright red to golden yellow. The woods around Lake Vermilion became a picturesque canvas that I admired every day from my veranda. The days were getting shorter and the nights colder, but that only added to the coziness of evenings by the fireplace with a book and a glass of whiskey. In October, Norman called again with news from Des Moines. "I didn't want to bother you, but I think you should know," he began. "Decker and Rowena were divorced." I gripped the phone receiver tighter. "When?" "Officially 2 weeks ago, but in fact, from what I'd heard, they'd been separated since the summer, after their plans to get your money finally fell through." I didn't know how to feel. Part of me felt gloating satisfaction. They'd betrayed me and paid for it. The other part of me was sad about the way things had turned out. "Sakumon, there was something else," Norman continued. "Rowena has started spreading rumors that you set them up on purpose, trapped them to disinherit Decker. And does anyone believe this nonsense? Not really, especially after it turns out she's pulled stunts like this before. Turns out she had another husband before Decker, an elderly businessman from Omaha. She tried something similar there, but failed." "A professional money hunter," I chuckled. "And Decker? What about him?" Last I heard, he'd gone to California, got a job as a mechanic at an auto body shop, lives modestly but steadily. After that conversation, I sat on the porch looking out over the lake for a long time. The news of Decker and Rowena's divorce stirred something inside. Not a desire to repair the relationship, no. Rather, a realization that this chapter was truly closed. They got what they deserved. Not from me, but from life itself. Rowena lost her prey. Decker lost his wife and his way of life. And me, I got my freedom. Freedom from toxic relationships, from manipulation, from feeling guilty for something that wasn't my fault. In late October, on a particularly clear day, I took a boat out to the quietest part of the lake. I took with me a thermos of coffee and a small photograph of Linda, the one of her wedding in a silver frame. Shutting off the engine in the middle of the lake, I pulled out the photo and set it on the seat across from me, poured coffee into 2 cups, one for myself, one for her. It was an old-fashioned oddity, but it seemed right to me. "Here we go, honey," I said, looking at her smiling face. "We're finally at the lake, just like we always wanted to be." The wind lightly touched the surface of the water, creating ripples in which the sun was reflected in thousands of golden shards. "You know, I often think about what you said to me before you left, about Decker. You were right, as always." I sipped my coffee, enjoying the peace and quiet. "I must have made a lot of mistakes in raising him. Too often absent, too little talk about the important things. But you know what? I did the best I could. I tried to be a good father, a good husband. And at the end of the day, everyone chooses their own path." I looked at the lake, at the woods along the shores, at the sky, clear and vast, breathing in the fresh, cool air. "It's nice here, Linda. It's peaceful. I've made friends. I've got things to do. The foundation in your name is helping kids. They've already given out 10 scholarships. I think you'd like that." I took another sip of coffee, feeling warmth spreading through my body. And most importantly, I'm finally free. From anger, from resentment, from regret. I let it all go, Linda. And now I'm just living. I raised my cup as if in a toast. To a new life, darling. To peace of mind. To freedom from toxic relationships. A flock of wild ducks flew over the lake, heading south. I watched them go, thinking about how bizarre life is. Who would have thought that at 69 I would start over? That I would find peace and happiness after such a betrayal? And yet it happened. I sat in a boat in the middle of the lake that Linda and I had once dreamed of, and I felt peaceful, like the sun had finally come out after a long storm. "You know what, Linda?" I whispered, looking at the picture. "It's gonna be okay. I'm okay. I'm finally okay." I started the motor and steered the boat toward shore, toward my new home, toward my new life. There were many more days ahead on this lake, many evenings by the fireplace, many conversations with friends, and it was a good prospect. It was the life I had chosen for myself.